When Taz called me up and asked me to speak on jury selection, I was thinking about it, and I said to myself, when you're talking about jury selection, that is probably the single most important part of a case. Preparation, evidence, witnesses, statements, doesn't mean anything unless you have a good jury. And I've seen more than one case, great cases, and you have a lousy jury. It doesn't make a damn bit of difference unless you have a good jury. So it is probably the single most important thing that you're going to learn to do to be a good jury lawyer, is to be able to pick good juries. And but on the other hand, it's the most important, yet it's the most unscientific. It is the most difficult to learn. It differs from case to case, and you're never going to master it. Anybody says, I can pick great juries, they're lying to you. You can't. You can do it 1,000 times, and you're going to pick people that are just not good jurors. But what it is you got to go by certain rules. It's kind of like teaching blackjack. I can teach you blackjack. I can tell you all the rules to play blackjack, and you'll know how to play blackjack. But there's going to be a certain amount of luck. In other words, you can do all the right things. You can take a hit 117 when he's got a 3 and all this thing, and you can still lose. And that's the way it is in jury selection. But the key is, just as in playing blackjack, is to stay by the rules. You know, when you're going in down Atlantic City, the people that generally win at blackjack are the people that have certain rules, they stay by them, they continue. Some days they're going to lose. They're going to get that bad card flipped on them, and you may get that bad juror flipped on you. But over the long haul, these people playing blackjack are going to win because they stay by certain rules. And that's all I can tell you when I talk to you about this, is to play by the certain rules and don't bend them and don't change them. And if you continue with those rules throughout your career, you're going to have more success than failure, just as the blackjack player would. Now, I thought I'd do two things today. One, I'd give you the basic mechanics of how a jury is selected, because none of you apparently have tried a jury, and I know for me, when I first came into the office, the first jury selection process I saw or heard about was the one I did. And that's not the way it should be. So the first thing I'm going to tell you, besides my talk about how the mechanics of it go, after I talk to you about it, the next time you have an opportunity where you hear someone's picking a jury and you have free time, go over and watch it. You know, most of these judges like Guarino or Kubaki, it only takes an hour and a half or 2 hours. You can actually see the process, and it makes a lot more sense to you when you see it. It's like explaining a game, but if you play it one time, you understand it a lot better than just giving you the rules of it here today. So I urge each and every one of you to go over to City Hall when a jury is being picked, and it doesn't take you all day, take you an hour and a half or 2 hours, even if you want to just see part of it. You'll understand it a lot better than my explanation here today as to the actual mechanics of it, and you'll feel more comfortable when you go in on your first jury. It won't be the first one you've ever seen. Now, there's two types of cases in which juries are picked on, and that's the felony cases, which is the next program that you will come to as DAs, the felony majors program. And there's a way to pick a jury there, and there's a way to pick them in homicide. And basically, there's two different ways under each one of those. So under the next step, we'll go with the felony major program. And that's the next step that you'll come to. And first, I think most of you know this, but some people would be surprised didn't. I've known that. You get 7 peremptory challenges. You get 7 strikes. And that never changes. It's always 7, unless you have co-defendants. Okay, now if you have co-defendants, the other side gets what you get in total. So usually when there's co-defendants, they'll give you 8 strikes. And the two defendants can use 4 and 4 for a total 8. You as the DA get 8. If there's 3 defendants, a lot of times they'll give you 9. Whatever is easy. And it's up to the discretion of the judge. But most of the time, in my experience, if there's 3 defendants, you get 9. If there's 2 defendants, you get 8. And if there's 1 defendant, you're always going to get 7. And it never changes. Now, there's 2 different ways that it happens in the Court of Common Pleas, in my experience. There's what I guess is called the alternative method or the random method. There's 2 different ways to pick a jury in that program. And you have to find out, when you first go in there, in the room, you want to find out which way that particular judge picks a jury. And he's going to either tell you it's random, or he'll call it the alternating method, or pass the pad, or whatever. And it makes a difference. It makes a definite difference as to what you're going to do in the next 2 or 3 hours as to which method that judge determines. First of all, probably the most common, probably 80% of the judges use what I call the alternating or passing the pad method. And that is, break it down. They bring in 40 people, okay? They sit there, they introduce you, the DA, the defendant, and whatnot. And most of the times, what happens then, the next procedure, they bring all of them in, they're sworn. They're sitting there, you're sitting there, and you're introduced. The first thing that you have to do is you're going to have to give a brief summary of the case to that 40 people and potential witnesses that may be called or may be heard of in the case. And the reason for that is to see, A, if anybody knows anything about the case, the potential jurors, or B, they know any of the witnesses. And it's not an opening statement. All it is, ladies and gentlemen, this is an incident that occurred on January the 27th at 8 o'clock in which Joe Smith was robbed at point of gun and fled thereafter. You'll hear the name Joe Smith, you'll hear from him, and you may hear Mary Jones, and you may hear from police officer Smith and whatnot. You just mention the names. Either, don't commit yourself, you will hear from these. Just say these are names that you will hear from or about during the course of the trial, because you don't want to commit yourself to calling any individual at that early stage of the case. And then you'll say, or the judge will say, does anyone here, A, know anything about the incident, or does anybody know any of the people that have just been mentioned? The next step, some judges do this, some don't. They may ask the defense to not give anything about their defense, but just indicate names that may come up during the course of the trial from the defense side to see whether they know anything about the case at all. So now you're at that situation. The jurors, the 40 people, know something about the case, and they either indicate what they know something about it or they don't. Most of the times, in most of our felony cases, they don't know anything about it, unless you have like a very high publicity felony case. Most 99% of the times they don't. So then you sit back down, and then the judge takes over at that point. Now the 40 people are sitting out like where you are there, and the judge then asks a series of questions to the potential jurors. And the questions that he basically asks are, he gives them like a brief summary of the law. You know, the defendant's presumed innocent, that the defendant has no right to, doesn't have to testify, and that it can't be held against him if he does not testify. And he gives them just basic general principles of law. Then he'll say to them, is there anybody here that can't follow those basic premises of the law? And nobody ever raises their hand. Occasionally you get somebody, the ones that raise their hand to everything. Yeah, I can't follow law, you know, everything. They raise their hands to everything. And you know those right away, and because anything, they answer any question. And the next question he usually asks is anybody here related by blood or marriage or has a close personal friendship with a police officer or law enforcement, they usually term it. And a lot of people raise their hand, and everybody knows somebody that's in law enforcement some way, and everybody raises their hand. The court officer then will go around, and I brought with me to show to you, some of you may never have seen them. When you first walk in, they hand you two of these pieces of paper, page 1, page 2, and there's numbers down the side of them here. And what those numbers are, they're the computer number that's given to the individual juror. Now, you're given these, obviously, without the markings on them, and it'll be 40 people generally, sometimes 35, but usually 40. And what the court officers then go around and say, like, does anyone here know any law enforcement? And then they'll raise their hand, and the court officer will go, if Your Honor pleases, juror number 43, George Crane III. Now, you have these pages with you in front of you. Now, what you do is mark on this page, and the best thing I can suggest is make a code for yourself, because you can't write out knows law enforcement, because there's going to be like maybe 15 or 20 of them. So I always write, for years, I've just wrote cop, and I know what that means. And you all do your own little code to know what that particular response means. You can just put a C for cop or an L for law, whatever it is for you, then you know that, because it goes fast. And you know, they'll name 5, 6, 7 right in a row, so you've got to be able to look right down your sheets. Now, you've got these two sheets, and they'll ask, is he a cop? Then they'll ask, has anyone here been a victim of a crime? Generally speaking, they'll ask that. Some judges will say, they'll only ask it if it's like you're trying a crime of violence. They'll say, is anybody here a victim of a crime of violence? They may limit it that much. Then that's all they're really required to do, but some, you know, will open it up even more, any crime. And people raise their hand, and again, you'll have your sheets here. You mark it down, C for crime, or write anything down that you can quickly, so you'll have it on these sheets. And then they'll ask, besides following the law, does anybody here have a severe hardship This is where you really get to people. They raise their hands, and they all have a severe hardship. And you mark that down on your page. And whatever the judge's questions ask, and they differ from judge to judge, they mark them down on this page. Now, you've got these 2 pages. You've asked the general questions by the judge. What's the next step? Well, the next step is, under this method, the first method I told you about, the random passing the pad, is this. They'll call 12 people, names out of a hat. They'll pull them out, and they'll just numbers, you know, and they'll read them out, and they'll take, first one goes in jury spot number 1, second one goes in jury spot number 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 12. Now you're sitting there with 12 people sitting in the box, you and the defense counsel and the judge. The first one, now it's time for the questioning by the attorneys, okay? Now, the first thing you're going to ask, the Commonwealth starts first with juror number 1. You ask individual questions at this time. Now, at this time, you're going to want to ask the questions that corresponded to the things you put down on pages 1 and 2. Cop, hardship, crime. So you'd say to the first juror, ma'am, you indicated that you had been a victim of a crime. How long ago was that? What was the nature of the crime? And will it have any effect on your ability to sit as a fair and impartial juror in this case? And here's a key, and I'll get to like tips on this later, but at this point I think that's good. When you have a juror that you obviously like by just their appearance, okay, it's at this critical stage is how you phrase your questions. If it's this wonderful-looking Commonwealth juror, the guy that would hang his mother, you know, if she did anything, at this point, you don't want to, if they indicate that they're a police officer or a victim of a crime, you want to ask the questions in a fashion that's going to make them not answer it in a way that's going to get them excused for cause. In other words, the person says he's been a victim of a crime, a woman. So you don't say to the woman, you've been a victim of a crime, what was that? Robbery? Yeah? Well, what was it about? Tell us about it. Would that affect your influence? No, you'd be nice to her. You say to her, ma'am, I indicate that, and you lead her. It's you leading the witness, just as you would do in a cross-examination. This is a favorable witness to you. This is somebody that you want as a juror, so you don't start jumping on them or ask them in open-ended ways. You don't want to say to them, ma'am, would that have any effect on you? Because then she may say, yes, right? And then that's not the answer you want. So what you do at that point is you say to the woman, ma'am, you indicated that you were robbed at point of knife. Now, this defendant didn't do that, of course. Now, that wouldn't have any effect on, of course, that wouldn't have any effect on your deciding whether this guy is innocent or not, or guilty, because that had nothing to do with your incident, of course, right? And she'll say, oh, then it's phrased in those ways, she feels like a jerk if she says, well, yeah, it would, yeah, it might bother me that do it. But, and then they look like foolish. So you want to put them in a situation with a juror that you like, because you're trying to minimize your using the strikes, of not letting her open-ended say, well, it might bother me or something, because you don't want those answers, because that just jumps out at the defense, and then they'll go all on it. So what you want to do is you want to bring them right into you. Just the opposite. If it's somebody that looks like they're a defendant themselves, you don't open-end up the question then. They say they're a crime of violence, right? And yeah, my brother was killed. And you say, well, sir, the fact that your brother was killed in a violent crime like that, that might affect you here, right? In deciding whether this guy is guilty or not, that terrible trauma that happened to you. And he goes, yeah, it might. Yeah, you would come to think of it, it might. And you make it nice for him. You give him an easy way out. And the other people that you want, you give them an easy way to stay in. So that's really important. I've seen so many lawyers, you'd never want to open-end the question to jurors you like, and you want to make it easy for the ones you hate to get out. Okay? So that's just one little tip at this point. And so you go through this process. You ask the questions on the first witness. Now the defense will ask questions of that first witness, our first potential juror. And you'll go through this process of all 12, okay? You go through all 12. And besides the questions, other questions you want to definitely ask. Those are a response to what the people indicate on the sheet. But you want to ask if they're married, how long they've been married. You want to ask them how many kids they've had. You want to ask them, and most important, their employment, how long they've been so employed. Because as I'll get to later, one of the things that you want as a prosecutor is stable people. You don't want kookadoos. You want stable, solid individuals as jurors. And what is more of an indication of their stability than a guy who says, yeah, I've worked for General Electric for 32 years. You want to know that. And by just saying to them, well, I work at General Electric, and not asking the other question, the guy might have been unemployed for the last 15 years and just got this rummy job at General Electric. And that doesn't give you the indication of his stability. So you want to know how long he's been employed, how long he's been married. You know, you say he's married, so, oh, he's stable. Well, the guy's been divorced 7 times, you know, worse than me. And you don't want to know that. You want to know that he's been married for, 27 years and he's got 5 kids, and that gives you an indication as to his stability. So that's a question you want to ask. And those, I think in the bottom line, those are the most important questions, because what you want is stability. Other questions that you may ask: what section of the city they live in? You always want to ask that. What section of the city they live in, because that is a strong indicator to you of their leanings. I mean, well, let's be honest. I mean, people that live in North Philly have a different perspective on law enforcement and the government than people that live at K&A or at Somerton or Chestnut Hill or any other different areas. You've got to recognize those things. I mean, and if people, a lot of people, I know I wasn't from Philadelphia, and when I came here, one of the first things to learn, and I guess most of maybe are from Philadelphia, but I didn't know sections of the city, and people would tell me, I'm from a certain location. It wouldn't mean anything to me. So if you're not familiar with the city, get familiar with the city. Get a list of all the sections, and let people that have been around and have tried cases say, people from there are good, and people from 33rd and Diamond stink, and get to know that. I mean, 33rd and Diamond, when I first moved, sounds nice. Hey, 33rd and Diamond, that sounds like a nice neighborhood. But you don't want any jurors from 33rd and Diamond, and so be familiar with the city before you start making these decisions. And as to sometimes I like to ask, and I don't like to get too personal with these people, because they have a tendency to resent, why is this guy asking me about all this stuff about my life? Some people do. So I don't think you have to know all that much about them, because no matter if you spend a half an hour with them, you're not going to learn more than what you learn in those first couple minutes anyhow, because it's the stability factor that you're concerned with, And but you can ask them. I like with younger kids, like 21, 22, because you don't know if they're going to be stable people in the future. So you're trying to ask them, like, what school they went to, and that may give you, what's the last school that you attended, is the best way to phrase it, And that may give you some indication. Again, it's difficult if you're not from Philadelphia, but you can tell, generally speaking, if they've come from, and again, you got to be realistic about this thing. This is if they've come from a solid, Catholic school with good discipline and a school of that nature, that's going to tell you something again about their stability, discipline, their way of life, and whatnot, which may give you an indication as to what type of person they are when you've just seen them for the first time off the street. And if they've come from maybe the public school system, that's a factor. I mean, it's not the determinating factor, but if they've come from the public school system, and we all know what the public school system here is in Philadelphia, that is a factor to consider as to whether or not you're going to eventually accept this person. So, with older people, the schooling isn't. But I mean, people from 20 to 25, I think I'll ask that question to them to find out what school they went to and if they graduated. See, like they'll tell you, I said, what's the last, another thing, the last school and year? And they'll say, well, 9th grade, it might be a great school that they tell you, but they only went to the 9th grade. This, again, tells you something about their stability. But if they graduated or, or they tell you something else about it, that's good to know about their stability. So after those questions are asked of those jurors, you go through all 12, alternating. You go first, you start the questions with juror number 1, the defense follows up on your questions. Defense goes first on juror number 2, asks their questions, you follow up. Then it just switches all the way through the 12. Now you've asked questions of all the 12 people. And my suggestion, the way I did it for 100 of these cases, is I prepare a sheet. And I used to just prepare one of these and then just go to the mimeograph machine and make 100 of them, so I have them when I go over to trial and just take a stack of them over with me. And it's just numbered, and in particular, it depends on what room. I worked in one room, 232, with Judge Gubacki for like 2 years, and so I knew configuration of the jury box, and I would make this corresponding to the configuration of the jury box. So I'd mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So what you do is, when they call the names out, okay, juror number 1, number 20, Raynard Boykin. I know I'm not taking Raynard. I can tell that already. But you write down here, they put, yeah, that's another tip. Never take anybody named Raynard. That's a and you put Raynard Boykin here, and the thing, and the number. And then when you're questioning them, you write down the things like Mayfair, because you're going to have to go back to this. You're going to go through the 12. Going through question to 12 could take, 15, 20 minutes. So you want to write down in number 1 the name of the witness and the different things that you've learned about them in box number 1, so that when you come back to making a decision about that person, you say, what the hell did he say? Now you know. You have it marked down here. He's from Mayfair. He graduated from Bishop Newman, and he's married, has 3 kids, and he works at Bud Company. You know that right now. You're not going to have any doubt in your mind. Because if you don't, and I've seen people try to do that, and you make a mistake because you forget certain answers that they gave after 20 minutes or so. And so you write it down, you go all the way through, okay? Now you've got this sheet all marked up with the person's names and all their responses to their questions. Now what happens is this. I remember the first jury I picked was in front of Judge Kubacki, and I had, like I said, I had never had a benefit of a talk like this. I knew nothing. I was thrown in. Ray Harley, who was in the majors program at the time in 625, we had a calendar room, and I had just come into the felony jury program. I was in there like 2 days, and I was just learning and asking people things. I get a call. I don't know if you all know Ray Harley, but Ray says, Jack, this is Ray. Get over here. Jury trial. I walked over. He walks over. He says, here's the case, 232. Go. I said, Ray, what are you talking about? I don't even know how to pick a jury. What are you talking about? And he says, that's why they pay you, Jack. Go down there and try the case and shut up. They don't pay you to sit down here and cry. Take the case, go down and try it. I had no idea how to pick a jury. I'd never, these sheets, I go down there, I sit down, they're handing me computer sheets. I don't know what they're doing. And thank God, though, in 232, there is a court officer by the name of Helen Wolf, who is, as Bess put it, very friendly to all of the attorneys in the room, particularly the district attorney. She's very nice to you, and she helped me out, and she showed me all the things I'm trying to say to you here today. She sat me down and showed them to me and made it a lot easier. But if you didn't, you'd be lost. So now what your situation is this. They hand you a pad. Now you've got all the 12 things marked in your boxes. There'll be a pad handed to you, a yellow pad just like this, and there'll be a line down it, and they'll have 1 through 12 marked on all the way down the side on every line. And they'll say Commonwealth and defense on this side. Now you get handed the pad first, right? And what you're being handed the pad for, I was handed the pad, I thought they wanted to know what my luncheon order was. I was going to, not to excise, I have a ham and cheese, and just what, So, but that's not what it was for. And so number 1, you have to make a decision. You're the first one. On Venirman number 1, you're the first one. They hand you the pad. You've got the pad just like this. If you like juror number 1, you write accepted. Okay? Now, nobody sees this but yourself. The 12 people are just sitting there. They're fat, dumb, and happy, just sitting, the 12 of them there, just looking at you like this, And then you take the pad, and they don't know what you're doing either. They see you handing back a pad back and forth, and they're sitting there looking at you. They think you're like all lunatics. And you write accepted. You hand the pad over to the court officer, will hand it to the defense. Defense then will make a choice, either accepted or strike. Simple as that. Pad comes back to you. Now you have to, no, the pad stays with them. The pad stays with them for the second one. They have to make the first decision. That's important strategically, who makes the first decision. And so they have to make a decision on number 2. It's handed back to you. You make a decision on number 2 and number 3. It's handed back to them. They make a decision on 3 and 4 until you go through all 12 this way. And then the court officer will read, like, jurors 1, 5, 7, 9, and 12 remain. All the rest are excused to go back to room 111. Now you've picked 5 jurors, okay? And those 5 are like 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So those jurors are taken out into the room and probably held somewhere until you continue. The next process is the court officer will then call, she won't call 12 names this time. You've picked 5, she'll call 7. And she'll put them into all the blanks where people were excused, okay? And you go through the exact same process again. And again, you have the sheet, because now you've used a second sheet. You've used this one, all 12. You're going through it for the second time. You pull up another sheet, and let's say you've picked 1, so you X that one, and 3, and 5, and 7, and 9 have been accepted. So I used to just X these out, knowing that keeps it, orderly, so you're not putting them in the same position. You X these out, and now the first that she calls out, you don't start writing in number 1 again because you've X'd it out. Now you're in number 2, and you're writing number 2. All the questions I just asked you, we just went through, and then number 4, and then you go through the same process again, a pass and a pad back and forth, and then maybe you pick a couple more, and obviously you see how it works till you get the 12 jurors. And then you pick alternates. After you've gone through this process of picking 12, and you've used 7 challenges, it doesn't matter how many challenges you've used. If you've used just 2, it comes down to the alternates. It all wipes clean. The slate wipes clean. You start all over again. You each have 1 strike for the alternates. And doesn't matter how many you've used. If you've used all 7, you still each get 1 for the alternates. And let me tell you one thing. Be careful on that first alternate. I've seen a lot of lawyers get very careless with that first alternate juror. And they say, well, I got the jury, and, it's only going to be a 3-day case. Most felony cases, homicide, it's a little bit long because cases will take a couple weeks, so you're more concerned. But I saw a lot of people get casual in the felony jury program with that alternate juror. They feel relieved. I got that jury, and they don't concentrate. And it's very important. I know it's happened at least 7, 8, 9 times when I was in that felony program where the first juror went in. Because a lot of times what happens is these people go home, and they'll go home that night, because these aren't sequestered juries. They go home that night, and the wife comes home and says, I've been picked on a jury, and the husband says, the hell you have. And then you invariably get a call the next day saying, well, she's sick, Mary Beth is sick. And it happens a lot. It really happens, and you've got to be careful with that first alternate. So concentrate and don't lay down on that first alternate, because it's very important. And then you pick the second alternate, and again, concentrate. But that first one is the one that I've seen. I don't remember a felony jury case I had that went to a second alternate, but many, many went to the first alternate. So be careful of that. Now, the second method that some judges use, Judge Stiles uses it, Judge Levy-Anderson uses it. I don't know, I've been in that felony program for a while, so I don't know what some of the new judges do. But it's called the random method. It's a little bit more interesting, and it's a little bit more challenging in a way. It's a little bit more gamesmanship. What happens in the random method is this. Same process that I described before. All 12, you mark your sheet, all 12 go in the box, okay? You get handed the pad. It's not marked like this. No, it is marked. You have 1 through 12. You can strike whoever you want in that group. Like you look at the 12 and you say, well, I don't like number 7. So you mark on here, strike number 7, okay? Then you hand it back to the defense. They look at it. They say, strike number 3. Now 2 people have been struck. You got the pad back. Now you look at it. You like the rest of the 10. It gets a little bit of gamesmanship here. And you say, you like the rest of the 10. So you pass. And you say, I pass. And you hand it back. Now the defense attorney, it's up to him to decide. Now he can continue to strike. He can strike at this point. Another one, oh, I don't like 10. It still comes back to you. Now you can make a decision again to strike. But once the pad has been passed twice, in other words, I pass, I like, he strikes again. Now we're left with 9. I like those 9. Pass. He likes those 9. Pass. 2 passes. Those 9 are jurors. Okay? And it gets interesting in that way because you can start bluffing in that way a little bit. You can start playing a little bit of games with this thing. I've gotten a pad just to psych the defense attorney out. They picked a 12. Pass. Like him. And he's looking at you like, and then he gets the pad, and then he's thinking, well, man, I got to start striking people, and he strikes this one and passes, and I pass it again. And he's getting nervous now. He's thinking, well, does he know something about these people that I don't? And you can keep doing that. Just let him keep striking people, and he's using up his strikes the whole time. And he may be striking people that you were going to strike in the first place. So you just keep doing that to him, pass. And the guy really freaks him out a lot of times. So I don't think every time I've ever picked a random selected jury, I never strike the first one. I don't care who's in there. It bothers them every time. Pass. I like those 12. And they bends them all out of shape, and then they start striking. They think this guy he's read something about these guys. They're all his family or something, and he starts writing them all down. So that's the second method. And again, and you'll get comfortable with that. But So the first thing to do then is to go in and ask the judge, Judge, do you use the random method or do you use the alternating pad method? Because, like I said, as you can see, it makes a big difference. The second thing to ask the judge is who's going to ask the questions? In other words, a lot of judges will the questions about the that I indicated, the individual ones by the attorneys, like your family, your background, a lot of judges will do that themselves. You have no participation unless you want to follow up on something that the judge has asked, such as Judge Kubacki. He asks, what section of the city do you live in? You're married? Do you have kids? He asks all those questions. Okay? So basically, only if something comes up in the judge's questionings do you even get to say anything to the juror. So ask him what method he uses. 2, does he ask when the jury's in the box, who asks the questions? So you don't look like a fool. You start to ask the questions and the judge says, no, I'll do that. And then you look bad in front of those jurors. So make sure you know what method, who's going to ask the questions before you go out there in front of the people. And again, make sure you have that little short summary of your case. And again, don't make that a big deal. It's just a short, it means nothing to the case. I don't put any significance in it other than just getting it done and letting them know the people. Now, I'll tell you just briefly about homicide, and it's a lot better system as far as getting a better juror for the Commonwealth, I feel. But it's individual voir dire. And the only difference, in a capital case, in a potential capital case, it's mandated by law that individual voir dire take place. In other words, if you ever when you get to homicide and they say, well, I don't need an individual voir dire, and you want it because it's better for you, you say it's mandated by rule. I don't know what the rule of criminal procedure is, 11-something, 1114, I think, is the rule of criminal procedure that mandates individual voir dire in a capital case. And so in a capital case, when it's a potential capital case, that is with aggravating circumstances, you get 20 challenges. And the only difference is they bring the people in one at a time. They go into the witness box. And the method with the sheets is exactly the same. With these computer sheets is exactly the same, except you don't really have to write things down as much because you're asking each juror one at a time. You don't have to come back and remember, well, what did this guy say? You're asking them right then and there, and you don't pass any pad. You'll ask them questions, defense will ask a question, and there's no pad, there's nothing. You just stand up and say, this juror is acceptable to the Commonwealth, or Commonwealth exercises a peremptory challenge. And that's what and the same method takes place. There's alternating, but since it's individual voir dire, you don't have to worry about tipping your hand to other jurors because the other jurors aren't sitting there and they don't hear what you're saying. So as a result, you have a little bit more freedom in if you don't like the person, you can jump all over them if you want, because you know that if they don't like you, tough, you're going to strike them anyway. So you try to get them out for cause, and you jump all over them. But you can't do that in the felony jury program, because you start jumping all over a juror, and there's 11 other people, and they're saying, what is this jerk doing? You know, this person, you know, and then they start to resent you from the get-go. So it gives you that freedom to be more of an ass, an individual voir dire, and that's why I like it. If it's a non-death case, you only get 7 challenges, and just like in the other program. But it's still, I don't know a homicide judge that doesn't do individual voir dire, even if it's not a non-capital case. It's just 7 challenges then. And there's a big controversy going on now in homicide. Some judges, you can just tell them, look, this is the law is that that every first-degree murder case is a potential death penalty case, that it's up for the jurors to decide, and that the judge can't make a pre-trial determination that this is not a death case, they don't have 20. But that's the law, and that's what the judges are told, and half of them don't do it. A lot of the judges just want you to articulate your aggravating circumstances before the trial, you know, such as, well, judge, this is a police officer who was killed, or that wouldn't be one, but like one of the aggravating circumstances is you endanger another person during the course of your committing the murder. And that's the one we use all the time to get 20 challenges. I mean, you shoot a guy in a lonely alley, and we always say, well, it could have banked off there and went up to the 5th floor window and killed the baby in a thing. He recklessly endangered. Judge is clear. We want 20 challenges, and they look dimly on that point. But in certain situations, it's applicable. I mean, if you go into a crowded bar and start firing away and hit somebody, I mean, you recklessly endangered other people. So it there's degrees of that. But we are, basically the policy now in homicide is we do we've tried to eliminate that phony attempts of 20 challenges, because we did it for a while. We tried to follow law saying everyone is 20 potentially judge. But now we basically, if it's articulately a death penalty case, we go for it and say 20. If it's not, we basically say, okay, we'll take the 7 and just go for the 7. So that's the way the system as it is in homicide. The only difference, again, is you have to ask the death penalty question. You have to say, is there anybody here that's morally or philosophically opposed to imposing the death penalty in a proper case? And again, this tool is very good because, again, you can get off jurors that you would possibly have to strike peremptorily by that question, because a lot of people don't want to impose the death penalty for whatever reason. And so it's a good question in that regards. And the law is that even though they can say they're morally opposed to it, the next question, follow-up to that question always is, if it's some rooms the judge does it, other times it's the DA, you say, well, even though you're morally opposed to the death penalty, could you put aside your personal feelings and impose the death penalty according to the law in a proper case? And most people will say no, but you'll get that occasional goofball who'll say, yeah, I'll put it aside. So that situation as a DA, you really got to jump over those people, because you're going to strike them anyhow. So you jump all over them and say, wait a minute, you've got this great deep conviction, you know, and it's fixed opinion in your mind, and you could just take that and just throw it aside, these opinions you've had all your life because some judge tells you to, and everything. And so a lot of people can say, well, yeah, I probably couldn't, you know. But some will stick to it. Very few, though, if you really get going on them, they start to realize the ludicrousness of their position, and most will fade, and you can usually get rid of them for cause. Now, those are the basics, okay? That's the basics. Those are the easy parts, the basics. The case law says that the object of getting a jury is to get, and I wrote it down, I looked into cases because I had to look this up because I didn't know this was the purpose of a jury. Voir dire is to get a competent, fair, and impartial jury. Well, that's ridiculous. You're not trying to get that. Both sides are trying to get the jury most likely to do whatever they want them to do. And if you go in there, any one of you think you're going to be some noble civil libertarian and try to get jurors, well, he says he can be fair, I'll go with him. That's ridiculous. You'll lose. You'll be out of the office, you'll be doing corporate law. Because that's what will happen. You're there to win. And in order to win, and the defense is there to win too, and the only way you're going to do your best is to get jurors that are as unfair and more likely to convict than anybody else in that room. And to go with that possibility, because the defense is doing the exact same thing. So you know, you're not like, if you think that it's some noble thing, that it's some esoteric game, you're wrong and you'll lose. Like I said, you have to go in there with the idea that you want jurors who are going to be most suited to convicting this defendant. Okay? Now, what does that mean? That means that you want, as I said earlier, stable, conservative people. That's what you want. Okay? What do you do to get those type of people? Number one, I told you. You look at their married life, their background, how long they've been married, how long they've been employed. Those same things I just went through, whether they've been schooled, how long they stayed in school, all these different factors to tell you that these are stable people. Now, I'm going to tell you things that I think over the years that have come to me of doing this. And again, it's all an individual. Anybody tells you anything about trying a case and says it in dogma is wrong, because things change and it's different for every individual. But I've had fairly good success with these rules, and I think if you stay to them, you'll have fairly good success too. And that is, let's face it again, there's the blacks from the low-income areas are less likely to convict. It's just, I understand it. It's an understandable proposition. There's a resentment for law enforcement. There's a resentment for authority. And as a result, you don't want those people on your jury. And it may appear as if you're being racist or whatnot, but again, you're just being realistic. You're just trying to win the case. And the other side's doing the same thing, so to just try to be noble and esoteric is not going to work. Now, besides those questions, what else do you look for? Well, in my experience, you look for how they're dressed. That is a great indicator. If a guy who maybe the questions that you ask you're not too sure of this guy. You know, maybe he has been a bit unemployed or has a little bit of instability in his life. But yet he comes to court in a three-piece suit. You know, his shoes are shined, and he obviously has some respect for the court, respect for law, respect for the authority that he's faced with, okay? And that is like, if that could be the factor. In other words, you're wavering on the guy, but that guy is well-dressed and he shows that respect, you're more likely to take him because of that respect for the court. And the same is true about a guy. Sometimes you see a guy who looks pretty good on the questions, and he comes in shorts and cutoffs and T-shirts and a T-shirt. And what's that say to you? That guy doesn't have a lot of respect for the law or authority. So that's not the only judge, but I'll tell you, it's a big factor. And I think that if you take middle-class people that are well-dressed, you're going to do well. I mean, it's that simple sometimes. And so look at their dress, how they act. And again, look at, another thing I've learned over the years is to look at, most jurors bring to court, because they know they're going to be sitting there all day, a book. They'll bring a book to read, because they know they're going to be sitting there a long time. And most of them, when they come to the room, they carry it with them. And they'll carry it with them up to the witness stand. They'll carry it in the box. Look at that book. You know, if they're reading, you know, Karl Marx, you know, you don't want this person, you know. And, or, you know, they're reading Ben Lerner's book, you don't want them either. So you look at the book that they're reading, you know, and that'll give you some indication. You got to use your own common sense on this issue. But, you know, if a guy's reading a book, you know, that is maybe a spy book or a police book, you're going to like that person because it's a person that that is, you know, maybe more philosophically attuned to conservative aspects, and that may tell you something about him. I've seen that happen on more than one occasion. Besides the background, I've learned, and my opinion is, you don't want smart people. You do not want smart people. I wish that you could ask everyone's IQ. If you could know their IQ, you could pick a great jury all the time. You don't want smart people, because smart people will analyze the hell out of your case. They have a higher standard. They hold you up to a higher standard. They hold the courts up to a higher standard because they're intelligent people. They take those words reasonable doubt, and they actually try to think about them. And you don't want those people. You don't want people that are going to think it out, and they're going to think about your case, and they're going to think, well, maybe the angle was this way, and maybe she didn't see it like that, and they're going to analyze it. You want people to come in there and say, yep, she said he did it. And that's what you want. So you want intelligent people. That's been my experience. I don't know how many juries have gotten hung up, and sometimes you have to take them. I mean, you're down to no strikes, and the guy comes in, and he's otherwise okay, so you got to take him. But they hang you up. I mean, I've seen juries out and out and out. And then besides all that, they get all hung up on the law. Then they start wanting to be, you know, Oliver Wendell Holmes now. Well, don't ever take a law student. Don't ever take a lawyer. Don't ever do that. I did it once. I'll never do it again. I tried a murder case in which the defendant, the jury, requested to see me afterwards. Now, and I walked in, and there was 11 of them. I said, I know we picked 12. Where's the other guy? And they said, the juror said to me that if he didn't get out of here, we were going to kill him. And he was a lawyer. He was a lawyer, worked for, he came in well-dressed. He worked for, he's probably about 28 years old, worked for like one of the big firms in town, but he didn't do criminal work. But all of a sudden now, all his law school background came back to him, you know, and now he was going to show these people what is right. Another thing smart people do, they want to, if they're with less intelligent people, they want to show how smart they are to those people, and they will, like, condescend to them, and they'll differ just to differ. You know, they'll differ, you know, they may want to convict a guy, and all these people that are beneath them are not as intelligent, say they want to convict him, and say, wait a minute, I'm going to explain to you why he's not guilty. And they want to be smart. So you want people, now you don't want, you know, the town idiot either, you know, you don't want that either, but you want somewhere in the people that are realistic, that are plain, simple people. And that is probably one of the best keys I can give you, too. Plain, simple, ordinary people. Another tip is, I've always found, and somebody told me this once when I was starting out, and I found it to be true. When you come in and bring the person in and you start asking them questions, if you don't like that person, for some reason, you don't know why, you just don't like that person, then that person probably don't like you. And that's true. And it's true because there's something wrong. Your nature ain't agreeable to this guy's nature, so he's not going to like you either. So, you know, you go with your gut feelings. I'll tell you, don't analyze it too much. You know, I'm sitting here telling you all these different little things, but don't analyze it too much. If you see a guy come in and and your initial reaction based on these little things that I've told you here and your own feelings is no, stick with no. You're going to be right. And if you get in there and try to think, you go, oh my God. I pick juries quick as could be. I don't even hesitate because I've got these rules down. I never debate. I've got these rules down. And you're going to be wrong. You're going to say, this guy, I've picked jurors that I thought, I've had a jury out for 3 days, and it was a fireman that was holding them up. A fireman. This guy was like the best, you know, guy came in. I thought he was the best juror in the world. I would have died to have him. And the son of a gun was bad. He was bad. And so you're going to get those people. But again, like I said, you got to stay to these basic rules. Another factor, I'll tell you, if you know, in selecting blacks, again, you don't want the real educated ones. Again, this goes across the board of all races. You don't want smart people. And again, but if you're sitting down and you're going to take blacks, you want older blacks. You want older black men and women, particularly men. Older black men are very good. Guys 70, 75 years old are very good jurors, generally speaking. So when I said, if you see a black man come in who's 72 years old and he's well-dressed and he had worked, those are great jurors. And I've seen DAs who strike it because, well, they're black, and that's kind of like a rule. Well, they're black, I got to get rid of them. But these people, in my experience, are very good jurors. I mean, they're from a different era and a different time, and they have a different respect for the law. And I've found over the years that they're very, very good jurors. Older black women, on the other hand, when you have like a black defendant who's a young boy and they can identify as his, you know, motherly type thing, are a little bit more difficult. The men don't have that same kind of maternal instinct towards them, and they're a little bit more demanding and a little bit more law and order. The other thing is blacks from the South. Excellent. Ask where they're from. You know, if you could tell them, if they say, well, I've lived in Philadelphia 5 years, if they're from, you know, South Carolina and places like that, I tell you, I don't think you'll ever lose a jury with blacks from South Carolina. They're dynamite. They're dynamite. They just have a different way of living down there, a different philosophy, and their law and order, and they're on the cop side, and those people are good. Again, I think black men are better. In my experience, black women, young black women, are very bad. There's an antagonism, I guess maybe because they're downtrodden on two respects. They got two minorities, they're women and they're blacks, and so they're downtrodden on two areas, and they somehow want to take it out on somebody, and you don't want it to be you. And so younger black women are difficult, I've found. Now, one other thing is dynamics of a jury. When you're picking a jury, you got to remember that you're picking a group. You're not picking one person to decide the case. You're picking a group that has to interact together. And that's why I'm saying you want people of all, hopefully of all the same intellectual capabilities, all middle class, same economic backgrounds, and everything. That's the ideal jury, because that's dynamically, they're cohesive. You don't want a person that's real smart, and then you don't want the real dumb ones down here, because their dynamics are not going to be there. You're not going to have some brain surgeon from Chestnut Hill with some nitwit from 33rd and Diamond. They're just not going to have any dynamics there. You know that. So you've got to remember what your jury is. And again, some people say, well, the best jury is all-white jury. I don't buy that, particularly with a black defendant, because you could have reverse reaction there. I think that you need dynamics, because you don't want anybody to go back in there, because a lot of times your witnesses are going to be black most of the time. So you don't want this all-white jury to go back there and say to themselves, who gives a shit? You know what I mean? You don't want that attitude at all. And you may get that kind of reverse racism in your case. I've always felt that a jury of like 8 whites and 4 blacks is a great jury, or 9 and 3, because then you're not going to get any of that in there. You're not going to get any of that racist type of attitude, because a white guy is not going to sit in that jury and say, didn't people live like this and that, with 3 other blacks sitting there in the room. So you got to remember you're picking a whole jury, and the jury dynamics are very important. When you pick a person, think, is he going to meld with the last person I picked in any way, shape, or form? There's going to be, I mean, you're not going to pick his wife, but you're going to pick somebody that's going to hopefully be cohesive in your mind. So the way you can't always, I forget the jurors after, but you want to pick them. Think of the one you picked. Is this person, do you think these 2 people could discuss something? Then go to the third one. Can this one discuss it with the last one? And you'll better get a jury that is more cohesive and dynamically better, because that's what it's all about. It's the unit. And sometimes, you know, the unit is the key. So you got to think about that when you're doing it. I'm of the opinion you don't design a jury for a particular case. Now, there's DAs that'll disagree with me on this, but I'm just giving you my opinion. In other words, you have a rape case, and you have a young 20-year-old black complainant. Well, there's people that'll think, well, this is black complainant, and I got to have people believe her, so I'll pick young black women. You know, and so you'll end up getting 4 and 5 black women on your jury thinking they're going to be helpful to you because you got a black. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I don't think it works. I think your goal is the same regardless of what kind of case you have. You want a jury that is cohesive dynamically and that is attuned and is conviction prone. That's what you want. You want a jury that you feel is conservative, stable, and is more likely to convict than you want to tailor it to any individual case. I think you're wrong if you do that, because you're going to be picking people in an attempt to make them believe this woman. You're going to be picking people who inherently may be against the government or against police or against the Commonwealth in some way, shape, or form. And they're going to go back there and make a decision on the case. They're not going to go back to make a decision, do I like this girl or not? They're going to make a decision of guilt or innocence. It's the government that's prosecuting the case, the DA, the police. It's not this girl's case. They don't see it as that. So my opinion, and again, I've seen too many people try it. I've seen too many people come back with not guilties doing that. I think you pick the same jury. I don't care if it's a black, white, Puerto Rican, Chinese, or what. You pick the same jury. You could pick that same jury over and use it in every single case. And again, like I told you with blackjack, you're going to get, generally speaking, good results because you've got a good dynamic jury. You got people that are stable and conservative and more likely to convict and not likely to go off on flights of fancy. And that's why you don't want smart people. That's why you don't want like very esoteric people. You don't want social workers. That's obvious. They're more, they got the intelligence, sensitivity, all this kind of stuff. You don't want them. You don't want social workers. Teachers you don't like. Teachers are bad, especially young teachers, like teachers that teaching like the grade school levels. Sometimes you get teachers like I've had good luck with teachers that teach in the public school system that teach, and ask them what school they teach in, and they may be so fed up with the garbage that they've had in their schools that they're like, I know this kind of kid, he's a pain in the ass. And that may be good. If you get like a white teacher teaching in a black school that's sick of these guys maybe, that may be one that you accept. So don't just rule out teachers altogether. But if they're somebody that you feel is somehow a little bit too liberal or esoteric, because teachers generally are in that area, don't take them. Bad luck with teachers, bad luck with social workers, bad luck with intelligent doctors are bad. I always feel doctors are bad too because they want to dissect your case and generally our cases aren't that. I mean, usually in the felony program you have one witness. You don't have, and they want you, and they're used to being, doctors are used to having, everything set. I mean, they've got all these little things and everything's organized and set and you can prove a point, and we don't have that. And again, so you have the intelligence factor and you have their ability to dissect and be very analytical, and you don't want that. You don't want them to analyze your case. Because generally speaking, if they analyze it too well, they're going to say this isn't enough to convict. So you don't want that. People are going to analyze your case that carefully. So I don't like doctors for a lot of reasons. Another thing, avoid afternoon panels. In other words, if you're picking a jury and you're assigned to a case and they say to you, the judge says to you, we're going to get a panel at 2 o'clock. Tell them anything at that point. Tell them you got a doctor's appointment. Your wife's going to give delivery to a baby. Anything. Anything you got in the world. Use an excuse. You don't want an afternoon panel, generally speaking, because they're rejects. They're people who've been asked questions in the morning and they all were bad, and they go back to the jury room and they send them back out at 2 o'clock again, and they're all nitwits, and you don't want those nitwits. And you're going to end up, so do whatever you can to avoid that. And I mean, I've used them all the excuses in the world not to get an afternoon panel. I mean, I've came back from the bathroom and said I just threw up, and I was sick, and in fact, I've done that. Sometimes I walked in when the panel comes in and you see what it looks like. All of a sudden, the illness level becomes very high. And I did one time, we were going picking a jury, and this panel was just unbelievable. I was getting murdered. I was like, it was ridiculous. And so what I did is I started with Judge Malcolm. I said, Judge, I just don't feel well. I really don't feel well. He said, well, we'll just get through the morning. And then as I got another bad one, I started to get really worse. I said, Judge, I can't go on there. I got diarrhea. I got And he said, oh, okay. Got rid of him, got him next day, got a great panel. Another thing to do, little tips too, when a jury comes in the room, the 40 people come in the room, count them. Count the blacks and whites. You want to know at every point in that case where you are. In other words, the 40 come in, you never get it just right. You don't want to look there and go, is there a black guy back there? Wait a minute, are you a black guy? No, you don't want to do that. You just look at a general estimate. Like say 40 come in, you get 25, you say it's 25-15. I mark it down on my sheet, 25-15. And then I know. And then I know how many are left, and I know where I am at all times in my jury selection process. And if you lose track, or you're not sure of what's going on, or you want to, you can always take a recess. Because a lot of times what they do is they'll like have the next group. The court officers want to set them up. Like remember in that method I told you earlier where they have, now we've picked 5, so they're going to bring 7 more in. Usually they'll have the next 7 sitting right out there in order. So you can see, you can say, Judge, I have to go to the bathroom. You can go out and see what's left. And check out what's left. See what's, because you know you got 2 strikes left. You want to know, look, if the first 2 are going to be bad, or I'm going to have to use strikes and the next ones will be good, but if there are 2, good ones coming up, then you know you're not going to have to strike them. And it changes your philosophy and your ability to make a decision knowing what's coming up. If you're just sitting there hoping and praying the next one that comes in the room is going to be good, go out there and find out. You can always get a recess. If you got to go to the bathroom, anything, you can get out there and find out what's going on and find out who's out there and who's not. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar. If we talk about the case law, I generally don't talk much about case law, but the new case is Batson versus Kentucky. I'm sure you've all become aware of that case, and I think that the policy that we should all take in that case is that, and your unit chiefs, I guess, will tell you when you get to that level, but I think the policy that we have been using is that, for you who's not familiar with it, that's a case in which a guy was convicted of rape, I think, down in Kentucky, and he was tried by an all-white jury, and the prosecutor had struck all blacks, and and it was a racial case, and under those circumstances, they ruled that that was not due process under those circumstances. But again, you have to read Batson. It's very limited to the facts of that particular case, because you had a racial case, prosecutor struck all blacks, every black on the panel. In other words, there were 6 on the panel, and he struck all 6. And that often isn't the case here. But in the future, we're going to have to be aware of this case, and the best way to avoid any problems with it is to protect yourself. And my advice would be in that situation is, when you do have a black juror, you question them at length, and on this little sheet that you have, mark something down that you can articulate later time if something happens. Because the way the case is stated, that it's only after a prima facie showing that you're doing this that it becomes that the trial judge can then order you to then start showing why you're striking them not on racial basis. So if you do, let's say you strike 3 blacks to start with, the first 3 people, and then it's like the defense attorney makes an objection saying that you're striking blacks. Well, you're not going to be able to go back and say, oh, yeah, make something up about why he did it. Write it down right then and there. I'd write it right in my little box there, and question him, say, well, the woman had a kid about the same age as the defendant, and I thought she'd be sympathetic to him, or she's unemployed, and I just don't like unemployed people because I find they're not too stable. Any of those reasons, have them marked down in those situations so that if the judge does come to you and say, what about it, McMahon? You could say, Judge, this is my reasons, and I have them marked down here. If he puts you into that situation. So that's happened to me in the last 2 homicides I've tried, that they brought that objection up, and by marking it down, I've tried to make a record of what my reasons are. So sometimes under that line you may want to ask more questions of those people, so it gives you more ammunition to make an articulable reason as to why you're striking them and not for race. So that's how to pick a jury. If you have any questions about that or anything about it, again, my only advice is to go over and watch it. I mean, I've told you the basics and some of my rules, but go over and watch it, the selection process, and then when you go in and do it, you'll feel much more comfortable. And lastly, what I'd say is I know some of you all out there, and some of you are in juvenile court and whatnot, but I was telling Taz out there earlier, I think one of the big mistakes our office has is that we don't take advantage of people that have experience. Not that they're any better or any worse, they just have more experience. And I think I attribute a lot of that to the situation in the office, being that there's the way the floors are. When we were back in Center Square and in City Hall, there was more of a camaraderie. You know, your unit was right here where homicide was, and you got to know the people. As a result, you were more likely to go in and talk to them because you were friends with them, and you talk to them about particular cases, and the wisdom of the ages gets passed down, so to speak. Under the situation it is now, some of you I don't even know, a lot of people in the office I don't even know, and as a result, I think we're wasting resources, and so all I'm saying to you is, I'm Jack McMahon, and if anybody of you are in, when we get into the office, into the regular office up there, have a question about a case, have a question to talk about in a particular case, feel free to come to me. I like it. I enjoy talking about cases. I enjoy talking about different strategies and different problems, and no matter how stupid the question may seem to any of you all. I mean, if it's a question, it's a question. I'll laugh a little bit, and then I'll answer the question. So my advice is, please, don't feel free to come up and see me, ask me about a case, about a particular strategy, or any question that you have, and I'll be glad to answer it, and I think that's better for the office professionally and personally. So thanks.